What's up, everybody? We are in 2 Samuel chapter 19, continuing the ongoing saga of King David and Absalom and Joab and Ahimaaz and so many more. Page 337 in the scriptures, question mark. And it was reported to Joab, see, the sovereign is weeping and mourning for Absalom, Absalom having just been killed by Joab with 3 spears to the heart, or chest area, after leading a coup d'etat, a rebellion against his father, David the king. But David is grieving hardcore for his son Absalom, who's just been killed on the battlefield, even though he told his generals to be gentle with him. And it was reported to Joab, see, the king is weeping and mourning for Absalom. So the deliverance that day was turned into mourning for all the people. For the people heard on that day, saying, the king has been grieved for his son. And the people stole back into the city that day, as people who are ashamed steal away when they flee into battle. So because of this cloud hanging over David, even though victory had been won, the people were not rejoicing. And the king covered his face, and the king cried out with a loud voice, O my son Absalom, O Absalom, my son, my son. And Joab came into the house to the king and said, today you have put to shame all your servants who today have saved your life, and the lives of your sons and daughters, and the lives of your wives, and the lives of your concubines, by loving those who hate you, and by hating those who love you. For you have made it clear today that you have neither commanders nor servants. For today I know that if Absalom had lived, and all of us had died today, then it would be right in your eyes. So, Joab says to David, hey, because you're grieving for the son that tried to kill you and take your kingdom from you, rather than rejoicing over this military victory and the fact that your wives and your children and your brothers are safe and your army was victorious and you've been restored to the to headship in Israel as the sovereign of Israel, rather than rejoicing over that, you're crying for Absalom. A, you're killing the mood here, but B, your heart is in the wrong place, and you are this is not right ruling. So this is actually good counsel from Joab. By the way, there's no J in Hebrew, which is why the scripture says Joab, not Joab, like the King James, which is also why we know that even though absolutely you can rebuke demons in the name of Jesus, there's no J in Hebrew, thus Jesus or Yeshua or Yahusha. But I know we can't let details and facts and figures get in the way of doctrines and dogmas. So, and now, verse 7, and now arise, go out and speak to the heart of your servants, for I swear by Yahweh, this is Joab speaking, if you do not go out, no one passes the night with you. And that is worse for you than all the evil that has come upon you from your youth until now. If you don't go out there and make this right, King David, everybody's going to abandon you. No one passes the night with you. Until the king rose up and sat in the gate. And they told all the people, saying, look, the king is sitting in the gate. Remember, Absalom used to stand in the gate, wait in the gate, and meet everybody as they were coming and going. Look, the king is sitting in the gate. And all the people came before the king. As for Israel, they had fled, each one to his tent. Now, there's an interesting thing that's happening here. Other than the fact that you may see a cow running around behind me, actually it's a bull. But without getting into the etymology of cow and descriptors for bull versus steer versus cow versus heifer. If you see a 4-legged bovine ruminant running around behind me, that's because it's the Sabbath and he jumped the fence. And it's really not restful for me to be chasing this, I don't want to use bad words, but to be chasing this dude around my yard right now. So I'm not gonna. But also interesting is that we see under the rule of Solomon, King Solomon, the two houses coming to fruition, Israel and Judah. But in 19 and 20, perhaps, if we make it that far today, you get glimpses of the beginnings of a differentiation between Israel and Judah. And this is something that mainstream Christianity gets wrong all the time. Judah was one of the 12 tribes of Israel. Judah is where you get Jews from, or Yehudim from. So Moses wasn't a Jew, he was a Hebrew. Right? And so people all the time like to say, we're exploring the Jewish roots of our Christian faith. Well, that's great, except there's not really any of those. Well, actually, that's a misstatement. There's Yeshua, during the time of Yeshua, the Yehudim, the Jews, controlled Israel. And for the first 200-ish years of Christendom, it was a sect of Judaism. It was essentially Messianic Judaism. Oh, hey, there he goes. Right there. See him? Yeah, I don't care. Glad we had that warning. But anyway, my point here being that we're starting to see the differentiation, even now, during the life of David, not Solomon, who was his son, but of David, of the two house, Israel versus Judah. And so, Judah and, well, we don't need to get into that yet. Anyway, as for Israel, they had fled, each one to his tent. And it came to be that all the people were contending throughout all the tribes of Israel, saying, the king, the sovereign, delivered us from the hand of the enemies. He rescued us from the hand of the Philistines, and now he has fled from the land because of Absalom. Like, this King David was really doing some great stuff, but then he ran away because of his son Absalom. And Absalom, whom we anointed over us, who then became king because David left, died in battle. And now, why are you silent about bringing back the king? How come we haven't heard anything about David becoming king again? And King David said to Zadok and Abiathar, the priests, saying, speak to the elders of Judah, saying, why are you the last to bring the king back to his house, since the words of all Israel have come to the king to his house? It's like, I'm hearing chatter from all over Israel saying we need to reinstate me, King David, yet I'm in Judah. I'm right here with you guys, and I haven't heard a word about this. WTF, what's going on, bro? You are my brothers, you are my bone and my flesh. Why then are you the last to bring back the king? And say to Amasa, are you not my bone and my flesh? Elohim, do so to me, and more also, if you are not commander of the army before me all the days in place of Joab. And so you see here David almost on a, well, I won't pretend to know the heart of David here, but it could seem to me like a political campaign of getting with the leaders of Judah and saying, hey, how come I haven't been reinstated as king here? What's going on? Now, granted, he did just run away from his son, so his popularity is not at an all-time high here. But to win some people back over, Amasa who was Absalom's general, David's son, who was throwing this military coup. Amasa is being brought on board as the general rather than Joab. That's a big deal. We'll see how that turns out here in a hot minute, but it's definitely a signifier to the people. And also, if you go and backtrack kind of the relationship between Amasa and Joab, they were cousins. So they were quite familiar with one another. And they were both men of war as well. However, Amasa comes out of an Ishmaelite, either daddy or granddaddy, I don't remember. But, again, neither here nor there. Bear with me. All the rabbit holes. So, David puts Amasa in place as his general, rather than Joab. Thus he swayed the hearts of all the men of Judah as one man, so that they sent to the king, saying, return, you and all your servants. So now Judah is clamoring, yeah, King David's good to go. We should bring him back. So the king returned and came to the Jordan River, and Yehuda came to Gilgal to go to meet the king and to bring the king over the Jordan. And so he comes to the river near Jerusalem, and all of the tribe of Judah, and all of, air quote, but a bunch of people from the tribe of Judah show up, and there's this procession back across the Jordan into Yerushalayim, into Jerusalem, into the land of Judah. And Shimi, son of Gera, a Benjaminite, who was from Bachorim. Remember this guy? This was the guy like throwing rocks and cursing at David a couple chapters ago. Hastened and came down with the men of Judah to meet King David. And with him were 1,000 men of Benjamin. And Siva, the servant of the house of Shaul, and his 15 sons, and his 20 servants with him. And they rushed over the Jordan before the king. And they passed over the ford to bring over the king's household, and to do what was good in his eyes. And Shimi, son of Gera, fell down before the king when he had passed over the Jordan. And so they're acting, these guys, Shimi, the guy who was throwing rocks at David, instead now has basically the entourage of David's household, his family, and they're rushing across the river to be the first in line to meet David and welcome him in. So definitely a 180 here in the behavior of Shimi, a Benjaminite, house of Benjamin. And Shimi, son of Gera, fell down before the king when he had passed over the Jordan, and said to the king, do not let my master reckon crookedness to me, neither remember what wrong your servant did on the day that my master the king left Jerusalem, that the king should take it to heart. It's like, yeah, you know all that stuff I did before? Let's just forget about that. For I, your servant, know that I have sinned, and see, I have come today, first of all the house of Joseph, to go down to meet my master the king. Hold on, Joseph, I thought he was a Benjaminite. What's going on here? More rabbit holes. Doesn't quite matter at this story. But Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, answered and said, should Shimi not be put to death for this, because he cursed the anointed of Yahweh? It's like, wait a minute. This guy, we're going to accept an apology from this guy? I think we should kill him instead. And David said, what have I to do with you, you sons of Zeruiah, that you are to be adversaries to me today? Should any man be put to death in Israel today? For I do not know that I am king over it. For do I not know that I am king over Israel today? He's like, am I king? You were talking to me about whether or not I should kill this guy, and that, you know, he cursed the anointed of Yahweh, referring to David. He's like, well, am I? I don't even know that I'm king yet, bro. How about you just pump the brakes a hot minute? And of course our friend Mephibosheth, son of Shaul, came down to meet the king, and he had not attended to his feet, nor trimmed his mustache, nor washed his garments from the day the king went away until the day he came back in peace. So Mephibosheth's been living pretty rough. And it came to be, when he had come to Jerusalem to meet the king, that the king said to him, why did you not go with me, Mephibosheth? And he answered, my master, O king, my servant deceived me. For your servant said, I am saddling a donkey for myself to ride on it and to go to the king, because your servant is lame. He's like, I was going to come. I was putting a saddle on the donkey, bro, but one of my guys, I was deceived. One of my guys lied to me. And he spoke slander against your servant to my master, the king. But my master, the king, is a messenger of Elohim. Therefore, do what is good in your eyes. Basically, Mephibosheth's like, man, we got some crossed wires here. It's just bad blood. He said, she said, you said, I said, that other guy said. Let's just forget about it. For all of my father's house were but dead men before my master the king. Yet you set your servant among those who eat at your own table. Therefore, what right have I to cry out any more to the king? He's like, what more can I ask? And we saw this chapters ago, I think in 1 Samuel, that Mephibosheth was brought into the court of David, given a place to sit, a place to eat, an inheritance. And he's like, so if I am wrong, if we got our wires crossed now, and this is why David is like, dude, why weren't you riding with me, bro? Mephibosheth's like, well, there was a miscommunication. But I'm not going to beg for your mercy because you've given me plenty of mercy already, so you do what's good in your eyes. Then the king said to him, why do you speak any more of your matters? I have said you and Siva share the land. And Mephibosheth said to the king, rather let him take it all, since my master the king has come back in peace to his own house. Well, that matter is settled. And Barzillai, the Gileadite, came down from Rogalim and passed over the Jordan with the king and sent him on his way over the Jordan. And Barzillai was a very aged man, 80 years old. And he had sustained the king while he was dwelling at Machanaim, for he was a very rich man. And the king said to Barzillai, pass over with me, and I shall provide for you with me in Jerusalem. He's like, dude, I really appreciate your help while I was on the lam. Why don't you come back to Jerusalem with me? I'll hook it up. Thanks for all your help. But Barzillai said to the king, how many are the days of my life that I should go with the king to Jerusalem? I'm now 80 years old. Do I discern between the good and the evil? Does your servant taste what I eat or what I drink? Do I still hear the voice of singing men and singing women? Why then should your servant be a further burden to my master the king? He's like, bro, I'm old. I can't hear. I can't tell what kind of crazy music you kids are dancing to. I can't even taste my food. It's like, I'm just gonna slow you down. Thanks, but why would I be a further burden to my master the king? Your servant would only pass over the Jordan with the king for a short distance, and why should the sovereign repay me with such a reward? Please let your servant turn back again to die in my own city, near the burial site of my father and my mother. He's like, I'm going to cross the river with you. We're going to go a little ways. We're going to say our piece, and then I'm headed back home again to die with all my other people. Thank you for the offer, but I'm old as rocks, bro. And the king answered, oh, I'm sorry. But here is your servant Kimham. Let him pass over with my master the king, and do for him what is good in your eyes. He's like, I'm not going, but here's my bro Kimham. If you feel it in your heart that you owe me something for assisting you while you were out on the lam, you can hook up Kimham. And the sovereign answered, Kimham is passing over with me, and let me do for him what is good in your eyes. Now whatever you choose of me, I do for you. Like, you got it. Kimham's the guy. Anything you need, let me know. Very, like, it has almost this Godfather-ish quality to it. Maybe it's just the state of mind that I'm in right now. But there's a lot of payment and repayment right here. It's like a squaring of the accounts before David returns as king. And it's good because he's sorting out where people stand. Are you with me or are you against me, kind of thing. Hey, you remember all those times you ate at my table and I took care of you, and then I had to run out of this place, and rather than running with me, you stayed behind? What's up with that? It's got that kind of vibe, right? All right, then all the people went over the Jordan. Like, all right, we're done talking. Let's cross this dang river. And when the king had passed over, the sovereign kissed Barzillai and blessed him, and he returned to his own place. So the old man went home. And the sovereign passed over to Gilgal, and Kimham passed over with him. And all the people of Judah brought the sovereign over, and also half the people of Israel. So all of Judah plus Israel. Again, that differentiation there between Judah and Israel. Judah being the tribe of, and Israel being everybody else. And see, all the men of Israel were coming to the king. And they said to the king, why have our brothers, the men of Judah, stolen you away and brought the king and his household and all David's men with him over the Jordan? They're like, why did they get all the pomp and circumstance? What's with all the fanfare of them? Oh, are you king of Israel or are you king of Judah? And remember, I think it was for the first 7.5 years of David's reign, he was simply king of Judah, not all of Israel. Yeah. And all the men of Judah answered the men of Israel, because the king is our relative. And why are you displeased over this matter? Have we at all eaten at the king's cost, or has he given us any gift? They're like, it's on the up and up, but he's our bro. It's just like Uncle David over here. Yeah, we're going to give him a nice welcome home party. And the men of Israel answered the men of Judah and said, we have 10 parts in the king, and in David too. We have more than you. Why then did you despise us? So the 10, you get the 12 tribes of Israel. You've got Judah and Benjamin are basically like hand in hand. And then you've got the other 10 tribes of Israel. The house of Israel is also oftentimes referred to as the house of Ephraim. But it's the 10 other tribes, Gad and Dan and Manasseh and blah, 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 like so forth, and Naphtali and on and on and on, right? And so you've got these 10 tribes now referred to as Israel, and you've got these 2 tribes referred to as Judah, which is Judah and Benjamin. And there's some, you can already start to feel the power struggle here. And the men of Israel answered the men of Judah and said, we have 10 parts in the king, and in David too we have more than you. Why then did you despise us? Was it not our advice first to bring back the king? They're like, hey man, this was our idea to bring David back. But the words of the men of Judah were harsher than the words of the men of Israel. And you know what? We're already 20 minutes in, and 20 is kind of it's not a real heavy lift, and it's not a real long chapter, but there's some stuff that we need to dive into a little bit deeper in 20. Yeah, we'll wait on 20. We'll do 20 next week, and probably 21 as well. Because, yeah, those are relatively short chapters. But, you know, I'm just trying to make sure that we maintain a grasp of what's going on here. I appreciate y'all. Y'all have a blessed Sabbath. Shabbat Shalom.